Welcome to part 2 of a 4-part narrated virtual tour series of U.S. military aircraft exhibited in the Smithsonian Air and Space Museum's Udvar-Hazy Center. More Republic P-47 Thunderbolts were built than any other American fighter airplane. Early combat sorties flown in April 1943 revealed that the Thunderbolt could outdive all opposing fighters, a definite advantage in aerial combat. It could absorb tremendous battle damage and continue to fly, and the 850 caliber machine guns gave it the greatest projectile throw weight of any U.S. fighter that served in World War II until the introduction of the Northrop P-61 Black Widow night fighter. However, initial operational experience revealed problems with the engine, radio, landing gear, range, and rate of climb. The first 3 difficulties were soon sorted out, but rate of climb was not dramatically improved until December 1943 when a new broad-chord paddle blade propeller was installed. Modifications incorporated in the P-47D model included water injection to boost engine power, a more powerful version of the R-2800 engine, increased fuel capacity, and a bubble canopy for less restrictive visibility from the cockpit. Thunderbolts were lost at the exceptionally low rate of 0.7% per mission, and JUG pilots received an aerial kill ratio of 4.6 to 1. In the European theater, P-47 pilots destroyed more than 7,000 enemy aircraft, more than half of them in air-to-air combat, with the remainder destroyed in ground attack missions. It was possibly the best ground attack aircraft fielded by the United States during the war. On January 27, 1946, the Army Air Force transferred this aircraft from active inventory to the U.S. Army Air Force Museum in Dayton, Ohio, and then to the National Air Museum along with other military aircraft. This Ryan PT-22 Recruit was a military trainer aircraft used by the United States Army Air Corps and its successor, the United States Army Air Force. It was the first low-wing monoplane used for primary pilot training and made for a smoother transition to more demanding low-wing fighter aircraft during World War II. This Recruit was originally the third of 25 built under contract as a float plane trainer for use in the Netherlands East Indies, but the sale fell through after they surrendered to Japanese forces in May 1942. It was used as an Army Air Force trainer until declared surplus late in the war. Since 1944, this Recruit had nearly 24 owners who have cared for and preserved the aircraft. Some have flown this aircraft in air shows, others just for pleasure. The Stinson L-5 Sentinel was the military version of the commercial Stinson 105 Voyager. It was a versatile, durable, and flew a wide variety of missions from photo reconnaissance to VIP transport. It was the second most widely used liaison aircraft, and it remained in service in Asia and the Pacific as late as 1955. The hook on this plane is called a Brody system, an ingenious system designed to allow aircraft to take off and land on a ship without landing on the deck. The museum's L-5 is the first production model built. Frankfurt's TG-1A was the first aircraft selected to train U.S. Army pilot cadets to fly the Waco CG-4A combat assault glider. 40 TG-1As were supplied to the Army Air Corps, but Frankfurt lacked resources to quickly produce a larger number. U.S. Navy dive bomber squadrons flew Curtiss SB-2C Helldivers against Imperial Japan beginning in November 1943 and continued until the end of the war. Changes in carrier tactics, technology, and weapons made the dive bomber obsolete as the war progressed, making the Helldiver the last dive bomber operated by the U.S. Navy. As of 2013, the National Air and Space Museum's Helldiver is one of 7 surviving SB-2Cs that are either complete and in museums or undergoing restoration. The Vought F-4U Corsair was positioned as the replacement for the F-4F Wildcat, but development delays of the Corsair changed all that. The Navy asked Grumman to develop an improved version of the Wildcat in June 1941, but what Grumman proposed to the Navy was an entirely new fighter. The advanced Wildcat had turned, by process of evolution, into the Grumman F6F Hellcat. The Hellcat would prove superior to its main Japanese opponent in most performance categories, especially at high altitude. The only advantage that the Zero retained throughout the war was its legacy ability to turn at slower speeds. The lightly armored Zeros were no match for Hellcat's rugged construction and 6 50 caliber machine guns. Not until late in the war would Japanese aircraft such as the Kawanishi NK-1 George challenge the Hellcat. American and British Hellcats would claim the destruction of 5,203 Japanese aircraft in the Pacific and 13 German aircraft in Europe for the loss of only 270 F-6Fs. The museum's Hellcat was completely restored by volunteers at Grumman Aerospace and sent to the National Air and Space Museum for display. Northrop's P-61 Black Widow was the first United States aircraft designed to find and destroy other aircraft at night and in bad weather. In the final year of World War II, Black Widows flew in the European, Mediterranean, Pacific, and China, Burma, India theaters, destroying 127 enemy aircraft and 18 V-1 buzz bombs. Black Widow combat operations began just after D-Day, patrolling English skies for up to 7 hours during the night, following radar vectors and attacking German aircraft before they reached their targets. They quickly expanded their original defensive interceptor role to also press forward as aggressors. They flew deep into German airspace, bombing and strafing trains and road traffic and making travel difficult for the enemy both day and night. In the Pacific, the Japanese for years operated lone bombers over Allied targets at night, and now U.S. fighters could locate and attack them. Soon Black Widows controlled the night skies. After declaring this airplane surplus in 1950, the Air Force stored it at Park Ridge, Illinois, along with important aircraft destined for the National Air Museum. Boeing's B-29 Superfortress was the most sophisticated, propeller-driven bomber to fly during World War II, and the first bomber to house its crew in pressurized compartments. To protect the Superfortress, Boeing designed a remote-controlled defensive weapons system. Engineers placed 5 gun turrets on the fuselage, each equipped with 2 50 caliber machine guns. Gunners operated these turrets by remote control, a true innovation. They aimed the guns using computerized sights, and each gunner could take control of 2 or more turrets to concentrate firepower on a single target. Late in 1944, the Army Air Force moved the 21st Bomber Command, flying B-29s, to the Marianas, and the unit began bombing Japan in December. They began by employing high-altitude precision bombing tactics that yielded poor results. The high-altitude winds were so strong that bombing computers could not compensate, and the weather was so poor that visual target acquisition was rarely possible. In March 1945, Major General Curtis E. LeMay ordered the group to abandon these tactics and strike instead at night from low altitude using incendiary bombs. These firebombing raids, carried out by hundreds of B-29s, devastated much of Japan's industrial and economic infrastructure. Late in 1944, Army Air Force leaders selected the Martin assembly line to produce a squadron of B-29s codenamed Silverplate. Martin modified these superfortresses by removing all gun turrets except for the tail position, removing armored plate, installing Curtiss electric propellers, and modifying the bomb bay to accommodate either the Fat Man or Little Boy versions of atomic bombs. On August 6, 1945, Colonel Paul W. Tibbets, Jr., in command of the museum's Superfortress Enola Gay, dropped a highly enriched uranium, explosion-type, gun-fired atomic bomb on Hiroshima, Japan. Following the dropping of a second atomic bomb, this one on Nagasaki by the Superfortress boxcar, the Japanese accepted Allied terms for unconditional surrender. The staff at the Paul E. Garber facility began working to preserve and restore Enola Gay in December 1984. The preservation and restoration project lasted nearly 2 decades and took approximately 300,000 work hours to complete. The Loon missile was an American copy of the German World War II pulse-jet-powered V-1 buzz bomb. It is propelled by the air-breathing pulse-jet motor, the long tube at the rear of the Loon. It was designed to carry a 2,200-pound high-explosive warhead to a range of 150 miles and could be launched from the ground, ships, or from aircraft. Development of the Loon came too late for use in World War II, and it was never used in combat. However, it provided invaluable experience to U.S. Navy and Army Air Force, and later Air Force, personnel in the handling of missiles. The Loon project was canceled in 1950, and this object was donated to the Smithsonian in 1965 by the U.S. Naval Supply Center. On October 14, 1947, flying the Bell XS-1 No. 1 Clamorous Glennis, Captain Charles Chuck Yeager became the first pilot to fly faster than the speed of sound. The XS-1, later designated X-1, reached Mach 1.06, 700 miles per hour, at an altitude of 43,000 feet over the Mojave Desert. The maximum speed obtained by the XF-1 No. 1 was Mach 1.45 at 40,130 feet, approximately 957 miles per hour. The X-1 marked the end of the first great period of the air age and the beginning of the second. In a few minutes, the subsonic period became history and the supersonic period was born. This command K225 represents the transition from piston to turbine engines that made several modern designs possible. Its heavy piston engine was replaced with a Boeing 502-2 gas turbine engine, and the combination proved to be a game-changer. With its lighter turbine engine, the helicopter performed far better, and its turbine drive transmission became an essential component on most modern-day helicopters. In May 1947, following an increasing number of P-80 accidents, Lockheed initiated, at its own expense, the design of a 2-seat trainer designated the Model 580. 3 months later, the Air Force authorized the modification of a P-80C airframe to serve as the prototype for the TP-80C. To provide room for the instructor aft of the pilot, the fuselage fuel tank was reduced in size and the fuselage itself was lengthened. Wingtip tanks were added to offset the loss of the fuselage fuel tank, eventually becoming standard. The designation was changed to T-33A Shooting Star on May 5, 1949. The Shooting Star was the only jet trainer in the U.S. Air Force inventory from 1948 until the introduction of the Cessna T-37 in 1957. It also served as an instrument trainer and utility aircraft, as well as a test aircraft. At the beginning of the 1980s, the T-33 was being retired from several air forces, including the United States Air Force. This aircraft was transferred to the museum in 1987, has never been painted, and has a highly polished natural metal finish. The North American F-86 Sabre design progressed through the mock-up stage, but by the summer of 1945 it was apparent that the fighter's top speed would be well below the 600 miles per hour called for in the specification. Fortunately, a great deal of captured German aerodynamic data became available to the North American designers with the surrender of Germany in 1945. These data indicated that a swept wing delayed the compressibility effects encountered at high subsonic speeds. The Air Force ordered 221 P-86As to be powered by the General Electric J-47 GE-1 engine. In June 1948, a month after the first P-86 flight, its designation was changed to F-86A. The Sabre had excellent handling characteristics and was well liked by its pilots. It was armed with 6 50 caliber M3 machine guns mounted in the nose and used a radar-ranging gun sight. The North American F-86 Sabre joined the ranks of the great fighter aircraft during combat operations high above the Yalu River over Korea, where American Sabre pilots established a victory ratio of more than 10-1. By the end of the Korean War, Sabres destroyed almost 800 MiG-15s with the loss of fewer than 80 F-86s. The National Air and Space Museum's F-86A is displayed in the markings of the 4th Fighter Wing, the first F-86 unit in Korea. The Sikorsky YH-19 was the first practical single-rotor utility helicopter. It solved the center of gravity problems of earlier models by shifting the engine to the front and placing the passenger compartment beneath the rotor hub. Originally designed for Arctic use by the Air Force, it served all U.S. military branches throughout the 1950s, especially during the Korean War and in most military conflicts of the early Cold War. This is the first H-19 and served mainly at the Sikorsky factory, demonstrating improvements to the series and generating flight data. In the Korean War, the Cessna 01A Bird Dog, affectionately called the Jeep with Wings, was used for a variety of missions including artillery spotting, laying communication wire, evacuating wounded, and dropping supplies and flares. During the war in Southeast Asia, the U.S. Air Force used the Bird Dog as an airborne forward air controller for jet fighters, marking targets with phosphorus rockets. The museum's O-1A served primarily as a training platform, accumulating more than 10,000 flying hours during its career, and is painted as Mobile Miss, an O-1A that was assigned to the 74th Aviation Company near Saigon in 1972. In 1948, Stanley Heller began experimenting with ramjets mounted on the tips of the main rotor blades, hoping to make small ramjet-powered helicopters practical and affordable. The Heller HOE-1 Hornet became the first production ramjet helicopter, and the Army and Navy flew a small number of these aircraft for a short time to test and evaluate the technology. The noise generated by the ramjets was considerable, but the most serious limitation was the enormous fuel burn, which consumed fuel at a rate of about 10 times what a piston engine would use. I hope you enjoyed this narrated virtual tour of U.S. military aircraft displayed in the Udvar-Hazy Center of the National Air and Space Museum. The museum is in Chantilly, Virginia, outside of Washington, D.C., is free to visit, but there is a $15 parking fee. If you would like to tour other aircraft in this series, convenient links are in the description section below this video. Here are YouTube's suggested links on similar topics that you may enjoy.